Hey guys, I'm here today to talk about all the books I DNF'd in the first quarter of 2019. So I DNF'd 8 books, I have 0 regrets, and I thought I'd talk about all these books in one video because I don't tend to mention books that I gave up on in my monthly wrap-ups, so I thought instead we can talk about all the books I really didn't enjoy in one video. So firstly, I have actually spoken about this book in a previous video, so I'm just going to touch on it quickly, and that is Lost Children Archive by Valeria Luiselli. This is obviously on the Women's Prize long list, and I spoke about it in a wrap-up of a few of the books I'd read. So I DNF'd this one about a third of the way through, so I gave it about 100 pages, and I just decided I really wasn't enjoying it. To begin with, I was a bit unsure, and then the last sort of 20 pages I read, I was just hate reading. So I had a look at some reviews and saw that some people had said the same as I was thinking, and they said it carried on to the end. If anything, it got worse. So then I flipped forward to further into the book and still really hated the writing style. And so I just thought I'd give myself a break and bail on this one, and I'm so glad I did because it just wasn't for me. The next one I didn't give much of a chance. I think most of these other ones here I was a bit more lenient on, so I usually get to at least 50-70 pages through a book before I give up on it, and I think I got only about 30 pages through this, and this is The Listeners by Leni Zumas. So basically I'd heard of this one when it came out and always wanted to read it, and then I read Red Clocks last year by this author, loved it, so then I felt even more compelled to pick this up. And then I read Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid in March and really enjoyed it and felt like staying immersed in that sort of rock and roll, very sort of musical focused world, and so I scanned from my bookshelves and saw that I had this. So this is about a woman called Quinn who, it says she's the other side of like punk rock stardom. She's broke, she can't pay her bills, and we're sort of following her as she's at a loose end with life. And so I thought that sounds like it might have a similar vibe, and so I picked it up. I got about 30 pages in. This was her debut, and I think it's very much, it felt from what I read, very much style over substance. I felt completely disconnected with the characters. It all felt quite like try hard. All the chapters are really short and sharp. I found everyone annoying, not even in like an interesting way, just annoying. And I had a flick through later in the book to see if it changed. It didn't seem to. And what I do when I'm not enjoying a book is I go on Goodreads and I have a look at the sort of 2-star ratings to see if the reason people didn't enjoy it is because of the reasons I'm not enjoying it. And if they are, and if they say in their review, oh, you know, this carried on all the way till the end, then I'm like, do you know what? I am confident that this just isn't for me. I'm just going to hate read this, there's no point. And this was that really, so it was a very quick DNF, and I just think that this feels like a debut novel of an author who has ability but hasn't yet managed to overcome her style, and so this felt like something she'd written for her MA and hadn't quite got past all the quirkiness to actually give us plot or characters. So yeah, I didn't enjoy this one. Glad I gave up on it. Another one is Some Possible Solutions by Helen Phillips. So this was a shame because I wanted to try and get more into short story collections again this year. I used to love and adore them and have been really rubbish the last couple of years. And I got to page 70 of this one. So I don't quite know how many stories that was. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I read 7 stories. They're quite short stories. So I previously read The Beautiful Bureaucrat by Helen Phillips, which is sort of a novella length book, I guess, and really enjoyed that. And it is very bizarre and cold and wacky, and it's not really focused on the characters, it's focused on this sort of bizarre capitalist idea, which I enjoyed. So yeah, I was interested in trying out her short stories, and I just found all these okay. And with a short story collection, if you're going to continue, because it's not like a novel where there's a plot, there's something to keep drawing you back to find out what happens next. You don't have that with short story collections. So if you're reading consistent stories that are just okay, there's no reason for me, I feel, to waste my time on reading just okay stories. So this wasn't bad, but in order to you know, keep reading new stories, they have to be more than okay. So yeah, just wasn't really bothered by this one, and it just again left me feeling a bit cold and disconnected. So that is a massive reason I DNF books, if I don't feel any attachment to any of the characters. And that can be, you know, I can dislike characters and feel attached to what's going to happen to them, but if I just don't feel attached at all, then it's I usually really don't enjoy books like that. The next one is completely different. This is A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Brigid Kemmerer. It's got loads of cat fluff on it. So this is a YA book, and I got really far through this. I think I got just over halfway, and it's around nearly 500 pages actually. This is a YA Beauty and the Beast retelling, and I just felt like I enjoyed the new Holly Black books, Is It Cruel Prince and Wicked King, and so I wanted to pick up something that maybe had a similar vibe, you know, so it'd be something I could pick up at the weekend and just like be absorbed in and just speed through. Initially I felt a little bit like that, and then I just really hated it, and I got to the point where I got so far through I was like, I could read the rest of this in a couple of hours, but then I was like, why? Like, just so I can mark another book as read on Goodreads so I don't feel like I've wasted my time, but I'm going to waste more of my time and I'm not going to enjoy it, and ultimately what matters to me is enjoying what I read and not how much I read, like as a quantifiable amount. So yeah, I thought this was like awful. So basically this is set in contemporary New York initially, and our beauty character is taken into the Beast's magical fantasy realm by his sort of chief of the army or something, can't remember his name, commander. And she finds out that there's a curse in which every season the Beast has to meet a woman who will fall in love with him in the hopes that this curse will break, and there is a monster who appears and kills loads of the villagers. What the beauty character doesn't know is that the Beast, this monster, is obviously the prince himself. He transforms into this creature and kills his own people. And it's just following their story. It's really odd because we know that in New York her mother is terminally ill and is dying, and her brother is also in a bit of trouble with a gang of drug dealers, I think it is. And yet she gets to this fantasy world, and within sort of 2 days she seems to be super friendly with the prince and his commander, completely forgiving the fact that they attacked and kidnapped her. Also really accepting that there's this fantasy realm out there, seems really fine with that, and also just seems to be getting herself really deep into this storyline and just not really bothered about her family anymore. And every now and again she'll like conveniently mention her family so we know she still cares, but her actions don't prove that, because she seems to care more about these men she's known for 2 days who kidnapped her than her family. And the story gets a bit more bizarre in that they decide to pretend she's this princess from another fantasy state, and they try to like, it's bizarre and it's so ridiculously lame, and none of it would work, and the speed with which they start all these political manoeuvres is a joke. It would take months, so it's just really bad, like really bad. So yeah, doesn't make any sense, really poorly developed, rubbish, so I gave up on that one. Then sadly I have a few epic fantasy I gave up on, and 2 of these are actually for a book club that I was speaking about earlier in the year called Queens of the Realms. This is a book club started by Chris from Chris's Bookish Cauldron, in which we read fantasy books written by female authors. And I think I'm not alone in having DNF'd these 2. I think Chris may have DNF'd both of them as well actually. So this was the January pick. This is Black Sun Rising by Celia Freidman. Now I'm really bad with like homework, so if there's a book I need to read in a month and I don't have a set date in which to start it with somebody else, I will leave it till the last possible moment. And what that does mean is that if I go in the Goodreads group and see other people commenting saying they're not enjoying it, it puts me off picking it up, so I leave it even later. And that did happen with this one. So in all honesty, I'd read people's comments saying they really weren't enjoying it, and I thought I'll still give it a chance, and I read the prologue and then the first chapter and I was like, really don't like this. This is absolutely awful. But I would usually, particularly in epic fantasy where there's lots of like complicated backstory, I'd give it way more time than that. But reading everyone's comments, particularly people who I trust and have similar taste to, I just thought I'm going to give up on this. So I did. So didn't give it much of a chance. Yeah, I can't even remember what bothered me now, to be honest. It was weird, and yeah, everyone seemed to not be enjoying it, so I gave up. The next month, the February read, I gave more of a chance to. This is Daggerspell by Katherine, Kerr, and I actually started listening to this one on audio, and I got fairly, this is covered in cat fluff, I got fairly far through this one. I think I got maybe like a quarter of the way through, and I thought it was like fine. I wasn't disliking it, I also wasn't really enjoying it. It was a fine audiobook to listen to. I think if I'd been reading it in physical form I'd have DNF'd it earlier, but the audiobook narrator was quite good, her delivery was quite strong, and so I continued. And then it gets to a point, so I'm, you know, this isn't like a massive spoiler, but I feel like this is mentioned in a lot of the Goodreads reviews, and also I think a lot of people find this triggering, so they'd want to know before they go in. There's an incest storyline in this which is deeply uncomfortable, like really gross, and I don't find incest storylines that triggering, because I actually think, it's a really difficult, odd thing to talk about, isn't it, but I actually think if handled well as an examination of what as a species we view as incorrect types of relationships, if they're both consenting, I think that's an interesting thing to consider. This wasn't done like that. It was really creepy. The girl, the sister character, has her like love of her life taken away from her. She thinks everyone's you know, gonna die and be desperately sad because of that, and then she decides she would rather die, and so she realises her brother has feelings for her, so she basically says to him, like, let's get this over with, let's have sex, and then you can kill us both. And this thought goes through her head, like, who better to lose my virginity to than my brother? Weird. It was odd. And then after that I was thinking about it, and I was like, do I really want to read a book where this really bizarre thing was justified and also not really examined? No. So I gave up on it. So there's that one. Another one is The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu. I gave up on this one pretty quickly as well. So this was actually going to be a buddy read with Heidi from My Reading Life, because we both had it for a while and thought it would be good to do a buddy read together. And Heidi, I think she may have even finished it. I DNF'd it quite early in. So this is around 600 pages, and I don't think I made it to 100 pages. I think I actually stopped quite before that, I can't really remember. So I started it, and even within the first chapter I was like, not really sure I like this writing style. I felt it was very tell, not show. I also wasn't sure about like the really heavy focus on politics and history. Sometimes I find some fantasy authors have designed this world and this political system, and they care so much more about letting you know about all of that than the characters, so you get this information overload about all the customs and political history, and the actual people are lost in that, and I felt a little bit like that initially. And then I also felt we were introduced quite a lot of characters, and all of them were men, and women seemed really lacking from the story, and I just wasn't interested. I think a big issue I had was the writing style, and then Heidi started to mention in her messages that she'd got further, and there still wasn't any woman, and there was one, but she had quite a tropey storyline, and she was only there to sort of serve this sort of male protagonist story. So then I went and had a look at reviews, and a lot of people were saying that, and I thought, you know what, I just don't care enough to get through this massive first book in a series, and so I DNF'd it. So there's another one. All of these I think I found quite easy choices to DNF. This last one was perhaps the most unexpected DNF, and that was The Dreamers by Karen Thompson Walker. So I started to read this on a coach journey, like a long coach journey home, and when Johnny and I had been to London for the weekend, and I got like 150 pages through in one sitting, which is unlike me. I don't usually, when I'm on a coach, I always take loads of books, and then I end up just listening to like a podcast or something like that. I don't end up actually reading, but this was just so easy to keep turning the pages. And then the next day after the coach journey I read some more, and then I just sort of realised I didn't care, and a couple of days went by, and I picked it up again, and I read one scene that just really pissed me off, and I just thought, you know what, I'm done with this book. I was on the fence, I was unsure, but after that scene I was just done. So I'm sure you know, you've probably heard this is quite a big new release. This is set in a small college town in California in which lots of people have started to fall asleep and then die in their sleep because they're not getting obviously any fluids or food. And it's called The Dreamers. You know, before you read it you go in thinking that's going to be a big part of the storyline. All these people are having really vivid dreams. From what I read, it wasn't, and from what I've heard of people who finished the book, it continues not to be. So mainly it's about the people left behind and how they cope with this, and how the world copes with it, because initially they don't quarantine the village and people think it's just a little thing, and they send some scientists in and none of these people are wearing, you know, biosuits or anything. And then as you get a little bit further in, the world starts to pay attention and barricades start being set up, and you know, it becomes a big thing. So I found that sort of interesting to consider how the world would deal with something like this unknown virus, this new thing. They don't know whether it's a mental health condition, whether it's something like, you know, mass hysteria. They don't know what to do, and because it's set in a small college town, I guess it's dealt with very differently to how it would be dealt with if it was in, you know, a massive capital city with loads of people coming in and out on business trips and holidays and things. So I thought that was interesting, and that really made me consider if something like this happened now, then how would the infrastructure cope with it. But other than that, I didn't really care. We follow various different characters, some college students, some college lecturers, a father and his two daughters, and he's like believes in the end, you know, the end of the world is going to happen, so he has like a basement with all supplies and stuff, all these different people. And you just follow their days in the wake of this illness spreading, and yeah, I don't like her writing style. And I can't quite put my finger on what I don't like about it. I find it two things at once. One of those being really just easy and simple and nothing special. So it's really easy to just keep reading and carry on and carry on and carry on, because there's nothing beautiful or complex about her writing style, which sounds really mean, but that's what I think. And secondly, it borders on, at some points, like saccharine and like really trying to be profound but really not. And I heard Sabrina from Unmanaged Mischief talk about this in a video. I can't remember if it was a monthly wrap up or a one-off review, but I'm going to link that up here because it's much more in depth than what I'm saying, and I, you know, completely agree with her thoughts. And there's one point in particular, and Sabrina read a bit out in her video, so definitely go and watch that if you want an example of the writing style. But there's a storyline that this isn't a spoiler, you find this out very early on. Right before the virus strikes, two college students sleep together, and the next day she succumbs to the virus and is asleep in a hospital, and you are told that she is now pregnant. She doesn't know, her family don't know, and every now and again you get a little insight into this fetus and its development, and it was like she thought that was super profound, telling us about how a fetus develops. Not really, it happens every day to like loads of different species. It's not, yeah, I don't know why we were supposed to be like, oh my god, like, you know, she's asleep and this fetus is growing eyes, like, yeah, okay. If you're telling me it's growing like 8 eyes, maybe I'll pay attention, but so there was that. And then the thing that made me put the book down was the whole time, whenever she mentioned this student who has the fetus unknowingly growing inside her, I was unsure what angle she was going for. It came across a little bit pro-life to me, and I was uncomfortable with it. And then when I eventually DNF'd, there was a sort of page and a half that was about that I found like uncomfortably pro-life, to the point where I just felt sickened and didn't want to read it anymore. So yeah, I really didn't like this book. Not only did I find it just basic and like just nothing special, I also found it offensive and worrying, and I think I'd be really interested to hear the author's response to those sections, because I couldn't work out whether she is pro-life and it's this thing she's stuck in there hoping to get her message across, or whether, I don't know, she was just trying to be profound and miss the mark. I couldn't work it out, but I really didn't like it, and I wouldn't recommend this book. I don't think there's a zero, I don't think there's one special thing about it, so there you go. So those are all the books I DNF'd. I don't regret DNFing any of them, and yeah, I'm getting more and more comfortable DNFing, and actually doing this video it makes me really happy with DNFing, because I look at all these books and I think, God, I'm glad I didn't waste any more time than any of you. And some of you I wish I'd wasted even less time on, you know, whilst agonising whether to give them more of a chance. So yes, let me know if you've read any of these. I'd love to know your thoughts down below. I find this really interesting, and also let me know how you feel about DNFing. I know some people just can't do it. I don't know how you force yourself to read books you're not enjoying, because it's not in me, and I would just stop reading because I'd feel so miserable about ploughing for a book that I dislike. So yeah, but I'd love to know your thoughts down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!